Welcome to Another Cup, part of the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network, presented by Kavoya Specialty Coffee, where coffee is always a collaborative voyage. Another Cup is devoted to conversations with suppliers, customers, and all the relationships in between. This is a bonus episode, Ask Rob Anything, about prices, the market, and the future of coffee, recorded during an Instagram live session, December 12th, 2024. Rob is joined by Kavoya's trade analyst, Lisa Collins. Lisa?
So we have some questions for Rob that I think some people sent in, and some things that are kind of relative to the times that we're seeing right now in coffee. So,
Interesting
Rob,
times.
Interesting times, yeah. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready. Ask me anything, as they say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our first question is, who sets the C price?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's times like this that make me realize that most people don't think about the C market at all. They don't think that it exists. It's just coffee enters this world in a bag and at a price. And so you only think about something like this when it goes haywire, which is sort of where we are right now. But the short answer to that question is you do, and you meaning everybody. The C market price is a on-the-spot, real-time discovery of the price of coffee using supply and demand and people who are willing to buy and willing to sell at that price. The exchange is an exchange. It's like a marketplace where people come together to basically barter and basically say, I would pay this much for coffee, and people say, I would sell it for this much. And so the people in the trade ultimately sell to consumers, and so they know what they can sell it for. So really, it is ultimately a discovery of the price that would be paid by a consumer for coffee and the price that a farmer would sell it for at the beginning and the end of the chain. So there's a lot more to it, and I think the subsequent questions will get to it. But at the end of the day, the C market price is simply a reflection of global supply and demand and what everybody who's participating in the trade thinks coffee is worth.
Following up, why is the C market going up? What happened?
So that's a long and involved answer, which I'll try and make as simple as possible. But for years, coffee price has been very stable. It's fluctuated somewhere between roughly a little over $1 a pound to say $1.80 a pound. And there hadn't been a lot of changes in the balance between supply and demand. And that has also created some space for specialty coffee to exist because specialty coffee lives in sort of a separate zone from that. Okay, if coffee is priced at this low level, specialty coffee is something that is more valuable. It's priced at a much higher level. And so as that has gone on, that's taken into account a couple of assumptions that are no longer true. One is that there's roughly the same amount of coffee available every year or a growing amount of coffee every year, and that demand and supply are roughly in balance. So there's roughly as much coffee in the world available as the world wants to drink. No longer true, which is the sort of short answer to why the C has gone crazy. The C has gone crazy because there's been successive years of disappointing crop numbers from the top producers of coffee, especially Brazil, and demand for coffee has stayed the same or increased. And so there's more need for coffee, and there's not enough coffee. And so it's out of whack. We understand it from crop surveys and what we can see from export statistics and just the availability of coffee in consuming countries for roasters to buy. And there's just so much risk associated with selling coffee forward now that the price has just gone up. So if you take the word coffee out of the conversation, you could put in any product that you want. If there's not enough and more people want it, the price is going to go up. And that's what's happened. And if you look at the contract listings and the prices going forward into the future, you can see that the sentiment is that this is a problem that's going to persist for some time. It's not like this is a short-term problem and next month there will be coffee. What the market is telling us is that there's pessimism on the amount of coffee that will be available in the long term. And I think that some of the questions we'll answer later in this program will get into some of those details. But that's the long and the short of it. There's not enough coffee. There's more people that want it. And, coffee isn't a thing that people just give up when it gets more expensive. It's one of the biggest traded products in the world. And so the price has to rise.
In your opinion, can we expect the same whiplash in the C market prices that we've seen this week? Yeah,
whiplash is a good word. And whiplash is a substitute for volatility. So it's not just the overall price. It's the changes, the rapid changes in the price. It's what's making people crazy. It's making traders crazy. It's making roasters crazy. It's making farmers crazy. It's making exporters crazy. It is very hard to handle to have a day where coffee trades in a 20 or 30 cent range from open to close, when for years we traded in 1 or 2 cent ranges. That volatility makes it very hard to understand what's going to happen. You see the market take off in the middle of a day. You don't know if it's going to keep doing that or if it's going to come back down. It paralyzes people. It makes it hard to make decisions. And we're no exception to that. But I think the thing to think about here is that volatility is an expression of the market saying, we don't know what's going on. Right. And so you have some people coming into the market saying, I would pay more. You have some people coming into the market saying, no, that's too much. I would pay less. I would sell for more. I would sell for less. And it's all happening in real time. So imagine yourself in a very crowded room of people who have very different opinions about something very urgent. That's what the C market is right now. And so that volatility will continue until everyone starts to think the same way. When everyone starts to think the same way, the difference in their opinions gets closer. Their opinions of what the price should be will get closer, and then we'll see that straighten out. So again, it's important if you're involved in this market as a buyer or a seller, to think that you have two things to manage here. You have the overall price and you have the volatility. And I continue to think that the overall price is under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of factors that are going to make the overall price continue to have more bullish pressure, meaning the price will go up, than bearish pressure where it will go down. But the volatility should resolve itself when everyone agrees on the same numbers.
That's a feature that would be nice to witness.
Yeah, no, this volatility is making everyone crazy. If it's making you crazy, you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely making us crazy here in this office.
Yes.
Okay, I have kind of a compound question here. What's the state of our upcoming harvests? Reporting is conflicting. How much are increases just finance bros using coffee to hedge against currency fluctuations?
Great. So 2 questions there. I'll answer the first one first. The volatility that we just talked about is largely being driven by the fact that the reporting is conflicting. So there are 3 major trade houses, we're one of them, that publish coffee forecasts specifically about Brazil, but also about the rest of the coffee world. And what has happened is all 3 of the trade houses have come out with reports that say the 2025 crop is going to be drastically reduced from the initial estimates. Some of the reports are very big reductions. Some of them are much smaller reductions. There's also been independent analysis from various consultants and crop reports from the USDA and from Brazil and then things that are going on in Central and South America from other agencies. And so there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of people who are basically publishing information that may or may not have an agenda, right? And so what do you do in that case? You have to synthesize it all and come up with your own opinion, right? And I think that it's a fairly safe opinion to say that everyone's numbers are down. So there's no sort of like conspiracy in the data to get coffee prices down. There's less coffee. Right, to get coffee prices up. There's less coffee for sure. And so everyone that, if you sit in an office like ours, you talk to exporters and producers all day long, and everyone will tell you that there was issues with the fixing of the fruit on the trees in Brazil in particular, and that has reduced the crop. In addition, we're looking at crop reductions in some other important countries that are just overall creating a much lower demand. In addition, and this often doesn't get a lot of attention in times like this, we have a full-blown logistics crisis coming out of not just through the Red Sea, but container availability throughout the Americas. So coffee that would once take 10 days to get here is taking 2 months, sometimes 3 months. You have currency issues all over the place. You have dock strikes imminent in the U.S. And happening in other countries. You have the results of various elections that throw trade policy into account, including in the U.S. And so, there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of pessimism. There's not a lot of optimistic news, and so the market reflects that. In addition, if you look at where coffee is supposed to be after it's harvested and processed. The market feels good when it's living where it's going to be roasted, right? The coffee needs to be there so that it can be roasted. If it's still at origin, it can't be roasted. And there's such an issue with logistics backlog and farmers holding on to coffee because prices are rising and you don't want to sell until you feel like you have a maximum price. Coffee's not where it's supposed to be. And because it's not where it's supposed to be, the exchange only has one tool to fix that, which is to raise prices. Continue to raise prices until people will ship coffee to where it's supposed to be. And if you look at the consuming country warehouses, they're largely empty. And then the tech bros, are there speculators in the market? Absolutely. There are always speculators in the market. Don't be surprised, though, that some of the tech bros are not tech bros at all, but they're your retirement fund. There's a lot of index funds that are just managed money, very boring, Fidelity kind of stuff where people are just putting money into funds that broadly invest in commodities, and they come in and out of coffee all the time. And they actually do provide liquidity for people who are in the market. It gives you a chance to buy or sell from a willing buyer or seller. And so it's not all bad. But if the question is, are the prices that we're seeing now the result of market manipulation by speculators? I'd give an emphatic no to that. I would say it's completely fundamentally driven by supply and demand.
Okay, so if I am a small to medium-sized roaster, should I look to the larger roasters as a guide to remain competitive in pricing?
I love this question. Our producer Mike has a wonderful phrase that he always says, which is keep calm and raise prices. And that would be my advice as well. But it's a great strategy to be a fast follower. So if you're a smaller roaster and the larger companies are raising prices, they've already given you permission, I would go for it. I would say that whenever you're in a business where you're constantly rotating the inventory and it's an agricultural product, the smart thing to do is to price on replacement. And the replacement cost has gone up. So the stuff you're buying, you're roasting today, you might have bought it at a good price, but you will need to take that money that you receive from that product and buy a replacement for it. And you'll need more money to do that. So you should raise prices for that as soon as possible so that you have the money to do that. Where are prices going? Nobody knows. What will the price be? Nobody knows. Anyone who tells you that is either has delusions of grandeur or has an agenda. But there are more reasons to believe it will go up than to go down. And so if that makes sense to you, raising prices is a good strategy.
If I rely on spot coffee purchasing from Kavoya, should I change my buying practices by building a position and factoring in carry?
Yeah. So let's break this down a little bit. So if you're a smaller roaster who maybe buys 10 to 20 bags a month or even less, and you have space constraints and maybe your demand fluctuates or you like to rotate in and out new coffees, there's a number of reasons why you could sort of go hand to mouth with your buying, or you like to mix between suppliers, or some suppliers have coffees that you want and some don't. There's lots of reasons why you would not build a position. The reason that you might want to consider that, and not necessarily you must or you even should, but the reason that you might want to consider putting some coffee on contract is simply to lock in pricing at a level where it still makes sense for your business. I understand, first of all, that we may be at a place where pricing already doesn't make sense for people, right? That at with a $3 C or a $3.20 C and all the differentials and all the cost and the shipping and the freight and the carry costs and things like that, that we may already be priced out of where people feel like they can run their business and still make a profit. But if you feel like it might get worse, then there's some prudence to at least putting some of your position in at a price that hasn't got worse yet, right? So that's a conversation that I think you need to have, on your team, and with looking at your spreadsheet needs to drive a lot of this. Where is the point where coffee pricing gets to the point that my business doesn't work anymore? And if we're not there yet, maybe I should consider some coverage at this level. And we've had days where the market goes up and down. The amount of volatility does create opportunities. So it's the kind of thing where if you're willing to dig in a little bit and pay attention, there are things that you can do.
If Brazils are so high and there's not enough to go around, what are some good alternatives?
Yeah, great question. And there will be a shortage of Brazils, right? So there's not enough Brazils to ship to meet existing need in the world right now. So there's the fact that the pipeline is going to empty. There's also the fact that right now, because of the fact that the market is inverted, which if you're not sort of super savvy on how the C works, it just means that the nearby price is more expensive than the future price. It creates a financial disincentive for importers and traders to hold coffee. The longer we hold it, the more we get penalized financially for doing so. And so it creates a incentive to sell coffee as quickly as possible. And so as a result, the people who do have Brazils are going to sell them relatively quickly. And so I can envision a point where well before the summer, Brazils are pretty hard to find. And so it's a great time to be looking at alternatives. Now, if you have say a wholesale contract or some sort of very Brazil specific need, then yes, you're going to have to either cover quickly and build a position or ration those coffees and take them out of places where they don't need to be used. But if you can switch blends, or if you can switch to things like central mild coffees, it's going to be great. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. For example, if you are using a natural Brazil as a blend base and you're looking at something where it's you just need it to have sort of a cost component and a body component with some sweetness. Honduras, Nicaragua, those would be great coffees to look at, right? Especially you don't need to go in and buy like the tippity top micro lot qualities. If you're trying to replace a standard natural Brazil, you could look at something like a low end strictly, right? The pricing is going to be much better than where the Brazils are right now. And there's a lot of availability. But that's the kind of thing where if you're going to do that, you need to start looking at, those coffees haven't landed yet. So if you're not familiar with them, you might have to take a leap of faith, because when they land, I would imagine that there'll also be people who have the same idea. So it's a good time to be looking at your options, seeing what's coming, seeing what's shipping. All the centrals should start arriving April through the summer. And, those who know what they want will have already done their buying. And so, the best time to start on that is now.
How do current ongoing ethnic and geopolitical conflicts affect the C market price?
Yeah, I would say that right now the biggest sort of geopolitical thing is the Red Sea issue, right? So if you look at what's going on there, the fact that every container bound for the U.S. coming out of Africa now needs to go around the Horn of Africa instead of through the Red Sea. It's amazing that this is the new normal, and it is, and shipping companies have gotten used to it. But it not only is it creating logistical bottlenecks because the extra 2 to 4 weeks that the containers are out of service, right? There's only so many containers in the world, and they need to be brought back empty so they can be reloaded. So but in the additional transit time and the additional cost. Remember, we talked about if you don't have coffee in the right place, the market keeps rising, right? And so coffee's trying to get to the consuming countries, but it's taking much longer and costing much more. And as a result, the market keeps looking at where's the coffee? It's not where it's supposed to be. The price keeps going up, right? Any further conflicts that happen that impact either shipping or the availability of coffee to get to port will only make things worse, right? And it's out of our control, but if you're a coffee buyer, it's something that you need to be aware of. I always get asked the question, what would you go to school for to be a coffee trader or a coffee buyer? And there's no great answer, but if I could go back and do it again, I'd be an economist, right? It's because it's the confluence of all the different events and all the different variables that the synthesizing of them together for me is the fun part, but it's also maddening if you're trying to make a decision quickly.
How viable is Robusta as a lower cost alternative?
Yeah, not very right now. One of the things that's really caused this imbalance in supply and demand was and much earlier on failure of the Robusta crop, right? So it's a bit of dominoes here. We had issues with Robusta going back more than a year now, and because we had issues with not enough Robusta available for the European roasters and the sort of grocery store brands that were known for using Robusta, they had to switch to Arabicas. And that created a shortfall in Arabicas, which was then exacerbated greatly by a failed crop, or at least a much reduced crop in Brazil. And then you add the logistics on there. It's been this sort of house of cards that has all fallen. And so the people buying Robustas right now are buying them because they have a profile that requires Robustas. They're not buying them on price. As a matter of fact, we had several trading days in this year where Robusta was more expensive than Arabica, which I never thought I would see in my lifetime. So if you're looking for cheaper coffees, you're going to be looking at mid to low grade African coffees right now, which are traded on flat price. You're going to look for low grade centrals and things like that. But yeah, Robusta is not going to be it.
Okay, we're on our last question.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
We ran through things. Okay. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the coffee industry today and in the near future?
I'm going to reject the framing of the question in that it's not just one. There's a few. I would say that for me, the biggest existential threat to the coffee industry itself is climate change. Nothing will make you understand climate change more than going to see coffee farms that have been in continuous operation for over 100 years, because they have generational knowledge of when crops are due, and we do the same thing every year on this week, and now all those patterns have shifted. The places that never had pests have pests. Places that never had fungus have fungus. Coffee won't grow in places that it used to, and it's suddenly also starting to grow in places where it never used to, but where it's really not commercially viable. So I just think that it's an existential threat to the supply of coffee is both the climate at which it's grown, and then it leads me to my second question, which is the viability of coffee farming as a business. It's just not commercially viable to farm coffee in a small scale, and at large scale, where the investment money comes in, there's probably better things to do with your money, right? So it creates this place where it's something that as the industry we have to grapple with. We have to find a way to make coffee viable for this next generation of roasters, farmers, small producers, and even in the trade. Right, it has to be not just interesting and romantic, but it has to be a viable business, and it has to be a way people can make a living. So so the earth has to allow us to grow it where we need to grow it, and then we need to want to do that. So those are my two sort of major categories of that. And then I think on the specialty industry, I think we're going to enter a moment of big challenge and change right now. This high price is going to be the catalyst for a lot of soul searching of what is specialty. If specialty existed as an alternative to low price commercial coffee, well, those days are over now, right? So for the same price that you used to be able to buy specialty coffee, it's getting paid for commercial grade coffee. So what happens to specialty? Is specialty going to rise above again and pay a whole bunch more? I don't know. Are consumers willing to pay for that? Let's find out. Or is specialty going to shift in its meaning in terms of a more deeper connection to the places that it's grown and the people that are involved with it? I think it's an open question, but I think that the question has to be asked now. And so there's going to be just sort of not just threats, but also fundamental changes to the industry. So the good news, I think, is that there's still a whole generation of people who love coffee and want it to be a part of their life, and they want to be a part of it. And we get to work with those people every day. So that's the good part. So, and we are some of those people. So I'm one of them. Still am after all this time.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. And let us know any questions. What email should we use for this? Mike.ferguson@kavoya.com. Send in your questions and your favorite karaoke songs, because we'll sing them tonight. Thanks.
We need inspiration.
You've been listening to a bonus episode of Another Cup, part of the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network, presented by Kavoya Specialty Coffee and produced by me, Mike Ferguson. Our free use theme music for this episode is Uncertain Outcomes by Primal House Music. You can email me with questions, thoughts, or ideas at mike.ferguson@kavoya.com. And as always, thanks for listening.
I still have a frog in my throat. Good Lord. Yeah.